Hi guys! Today we are back with the topic of
cultural segregation.
Yep. And the book that we'll be connecting that topic to is Your Republic is Calling You by Young-Ha Kim. So the reason that we chose this book today is because we actually had the privilege of going to one of his talks recently. He was invited to our school and then we attended his talk. And during that event, he talked about this book in particular quite a bit, so I thought it was a novel that he found particularly very interesting for himself. So I decided to read it, and it wasn't my favorite, but there are reasons to that we'll be going into. But first, we'll be discussing about cultural segregation. First, about the general plotline of this novel. Really quickly, because I don't want to waste time with the plotline. It's about a spy who has been forgotten. It's about a North Korean spy that has come down to South Korea, but has been forgotten by the North Korean government. And the historical background to this is that a lot of times when North Korea sends spies down into South Korea, which there's like hundreds of spies in South Korea, if there's the leader of those spies, and let's say the leader owns about 100 spies or something, but if that leader gets fired or something, then all of these 100 spies are forgotten in South Korea. So it's just one example of that kind of a spy, so technically an illegal immigrant in South Korea.
A little bit of background about the author. He actually grew up in the DMZ, and because of this, he was surrounded by a lot of bomb explosions and a lot of conflicts near the DMZ, and his father was actually a soldier. And so he created this story with his background in mind and what he experienced as a child and as he was growing up, and all the traumatic experiences, and as well as whatever he remembered from his childhood.
The author was basing his story, and the inspiration behind his story was his childhood and growing up from the demilitarized zone, which is the middle line between South and North Korea, the neutral zone. Obviously, growing up, he had a lot of questions about North Korea, and I feel like he kind of collected all this together to write this one book, which is called Your Republic is Calling You. So how does it connect to our life?
Personally, I think this really does relate to, especially for people who are living in Korea, because we feel like North Koreans and South Koreans alike are very blind about each other and about the cultures that are different but also alike, and we kind of treat each other as someone that is not a part of us and someone that's of a different culture. But even though there are differences, I feel like the book is trying to show that although there are differences, there are also similarities as well.
And the question that arose within me as I was reading this book was about what life is like in North Korea. And although it sounds like a very generic question, I thought it was very important because a lot of times if you're living in South Korea, people kind of ignore the Korean War a lot more than you think. And so you never quite think about North Korea further than Kim Jong-un and Kim Jong-il and the nuclear bombs, because propaganda everywhere and whatnot, right? So in South Korea, you really don't get a very objective view of North Korea, but there's this one part in the novel when the spy comes into Korea and he talks about the new movies that he's able to watch and all these directors that he was not aware of from his childhood, and this odd capitalist way that South Koreans are living. And I thought it was very interesting because even though we know that North Korea is a communist country, we don't exactly know what lifestyle is like there. Their lifestyle is like. We always think that it's all murder scenes and terrible life and everything, but there's a reason that people are still living there, and there's a reason why it's still a country. So those were kind of the questions that really started to boggle my mind as I was reading the book.
Adding on to her question, there's also the idea of, are we even the same country anymore? Because even though we're in the same area, we're still Koreans, there's still that, like I said before, there's still that difference. There's a distinction between North Koreans and South Koreans. And even when I feel like personally, in my personal experience, when I'm going to America or I'm introducing myself and I say, oh, I'm South Korean, it's almost as if I'm trying to separate myself from the North Koreans as well. And so in this way, I feel like there's also that question of, are we even part of the same culture? Or is there a cultural segregation between North and South Koreans?
So the way that we wanted to put cultural segregation into our topic is, first there's the cultural segregation of North and South Korea, but there's also a cultural segregation within South Korea, especially connecting back with the author, how we barely know what's going on in the DMZ and whatever's going on with the Korean War, and we're living our own comfortable lives that the soldiers and the government is providing us with. So there's a cultural segregation between those who are aware and those who are not aware, and I found that very interesting listening to the talk that Young-Ha Kim was able to give us.
Another interesting point that was brought up is that this work is a translated text, and there's always a lot of controversy about what translated texts are and how reliable they are and what they really do portray and how much of the author's intentions it does show. And we felt like for Your Republic is Calling You, the translation was very peculiar in that it was very dry, and you can tell that it was a very direct translation from Korean to English. So everything was translated very literally. So even the jokes that were very Korean were translated in that way. So we felt like it was very hard for people who don't really know the Korean culture, people who don't speak Korean. It was difficult to really understand the humor that he was bringing into the book. And even at the conference or the talk that he gave, there were three translators, and sometimes the jokes that were said that he said in Korean were not delivered as properly as Korean people would have wanted them to.
And even if, like, in that case, like, we know that it was a direct translation because we have read Korean novels before and we know what Korean novels feel like. But if people didn't know what Korean novels felt like, I personally feel like it might have felt very peculiar. A prime example that I can remember is that, like, in the book, in Korea, there's a Korean word for, like, describing how big your house is, and you see, like 54 pyeong or, like 20-something pyeong and stuff like that. And the pyeong is supposed to be, like, a unit for how like square feet of like your house or something like that. So you would think that if the book was being translated into a different language, those units would be changed. But literally in the book, it said like 24 pyeong, like Pyong. And I was so flabbergasted. Like, why would they ever translate it in that way? So that part was very disappointing for me because they honestly could have translated it much better than they actually did. And I don't know, it could be like a personal style, but you always want to translate it more towards the intention and the feel rather than what the exact words are telling you. So that was kind of a downside.
This also relates back to other translated works. For example, a lot of Albert Camus novels that we've also introduced on our channel as well. We also read The Plague in our Korean class, and that was translated into Korean. And so I feel like even that like reversal of being translated into Korean, it also takes away, we could feel that it took away a lot of the original intentions and some of the things that Camus originally made to be, humorous or to be very like touching. And it was very relatable in that way.
Yeah, and there must be something about like the original language and the people that speak that language that they can understand. It's kind of like a personal joke or something, like an inner joke that people that don't speak that language can't quite understand. So there's like a very cultural thing about that, which kind of gets me onto the next point about cultural segregation and how, for me, like reading this book in English, I felt like I really had to read it in Korean and ignore what I just read in English. And that's kind of disappointing for me, well, for both of us, because the fact that we have a choice of reading it in Korean, which is my mother tongue, is it your first language?
No.
Well, we both speak Korean like natively. So when we have the choice of reading a Korean novel in Korean and a Korean novel in English, we chose to read it in the English version, which kind of is very disappointing for us because we could have taken that challenge and had a better understanding of the novel itself. So partially you could even say that our criticism is completely futile. It's not the author's fault that the translation was bad.
And it's also the cultural segregation aspect of it is that we are separating ourselves from that, from discovering the Korean tradition, the Korean culture even further, and we're limiting ourselves by trying to understand it in a language that it wasn't originally written in, even though we had the choice to read it in its original language.
So if we do ever get the chance of reading it in Korean again, although it might take a while because we both didn't quite enjoy the book, then we might update you guys.
Once again, we hope that you have a lot of insightful comments and discussions down below in the comment section. And also check out our other videos from the past, and we'll also update with more. See you guys next time. Bye!